Perfect. Now, this would be a very short video about pivot tables and SQL connection. So we are going to create pivot tables using pandas. As you can see in this section, we used pandas pivot tables to summarize customer data in a compact and business-friendly format. So a pivot table helps us group data by a category and calculate useful metrics such as averages, totals, and unique customer counts. Now let's analyze churn rate by plan type. As you can see, this is a query pd.pivottable, bracket df visuals, values is equal to churn flag, index is equal to plan type, aggregate function is equal to mean. Now, this is the table that we get. First, let me explain what exactly this query means. Now, this function creates a pivot table using panda, pd.pivottable, parenthesis, okay? Now, inside this parenthesis, we use dvisual. This is a data frame used for analysis. Then values, that is churn flag. This tells pandas that we want to calculate a result using churn flag column. The churn flag contains, you can see 0 retained customer and 1 is equal to churned customer, right? As we know from before. So index is equal to plan type. This groups the result by plan type, and that's why we get the plan type. And the pivot table creates separate rows for basic, premium, and standard. That's aggregation. So basically, this pivot table creates a separate row for basic, premium, and standard. Now, aggregate function is equal to mean. That means this actually calculates the average value of the churn flag for each plan. And since the churn flag contains only zeros and ones, the average becomes the churn rate. Okay. Now, second one, as you can see. So first, as you can see, basic 0.60 is basically 60%. Then 0.14 is basically 14.287%, whatever it is. 0.22 is 22.2% approximately. So the result shows that the basic churn rate is 60%, premium plan churn rate is 14.3%, and standard plan churn rate is 22.2%. Okay, so I think it's very easy to understand this query. Okay, first I'll repeat. First I'll use pandas. Okay, pivot tables. This function will create pivot table using panda. This function is the data frame used for analysis. And like when we created a pivot table using pandas in the parenthesis, now if the parenthesis is like, you can say if I just press it here, then it's a normal parenthesis which creates pivot table, right? But now I have included everything in this parenthesis. So df visual is the data frame that is used for as like the original data frame, okay? And yeah, same way as you can see, uh, the values is churn flag, okay? So basically it tells to select that particular column, that is the churn flag. This basically tells pandas that we want to calculate result using churn flag column, okay? Then index is equal to plan type is this groups the result by plan type. So the pivot table creates separate rows for basic, premium, and standard. And aggregate function is equal to mean. This actually calculates the average value of the churn flag for each plan. Since churn flag contains only zeros and ones, the average becomes the churn rate. Okay. So yeah, I think this is good. This is great, I think. I hope you understand this query well because this is like very easy. But to just, because you are looking at it at the first glance, maybe you will not understand certain things. But I again and again explained simple things, which is like, this, what is this? Why we, first of all, I think till here it's very clear because we normally use a data frame. Then after that, what we do is we tell pandas that we want to calculate a certain result using the churn flag column, right? So I want the churn flag column. I want to calculate the result using churn flag column. Now, as you can see, churn flag we have done before is we have made it like 0 and 1. So 0 is basically retained customer and 1 is a churned customer, a person who has cancelled. A person who has retained is a person still active, and a person who has cancelled is a person who is churned customer. Okay. Now, index is plan type. This groups the pivot table, the results by plan type. So the pivot table creates separate rows for basic, premium, and standard. And aggregate functions mean basically uh, it calculates the average value of the churn flag for each plan. Since churn flag contains only zeros and ones, the average becomes the churn rate. So this is 60%, this is 14%, this is 22.2%. Okay. So now let's create a multi-metric pivot table. Okay. But before that, why do we use like pivot table here? Like I think many of you might have this question. So you see, normally we use pivot tables because it actually provides us another way to perform aggregation, right? It is especially useful when we want to summarize several metrics together, organize results in rows and columns, create business reports, or produce Excel style summaries. So yeah, that is why we use actually pivot tables. So anyway, um, let's create a multi-metric pivot table. Before creating a more detailed pivot table, we first check all the available columns. So again, we use dfvisual.columns, just displays all columns names in the data set. We use it to confirm that the required columns are available. That's plan type, monthly charges, customer ID, and churn flag. So this is like plan type, monthly charges, customer ID, and churn flag. It's there. Okay, perfect. Now we write a query, pd.pivottable. We tell pandas to activate the pivot table, and yeah. First of all, this pivot table calculates three different business metrics for each plan type. So as you can see, first we have use index. So this is the same pd.pivot table and df visuals, just like this. Okay. Now index is plan type. This groups the customer data according to subscription plan. That's basic, premium, and standard, just like this. Then we have churn flag, monthly charges, and customer ID in the values section. Here we just had churn flag. So in the values section, remember it actually creates these columns. Okay. Now what exactly is monthly charges? This is like used to calculate total monthly charges generated by each plan. Okay. Customer ID is used to count the number of unique customers in each plan, and churn flag is used to calculate the churn rate for each plan. Now, what is aggregate function? Now, this you're all set again. We have aggregate function is mean. Your aggregate function is monthly sum is sum, monthly charges is sum, customer ID is any unique, and churn flag is mean. Okay. So for churn flag, we use mean here, but because there are like two more columns which don't use mean, we use sum and n unique. So this basically why we use sum, basically this adds all monthly charges for customers belonging to each plan. So for example, the output shows basic 52.95, premium 218.93, and standard that's 123.91. So this represents the combined monthly charges recorded for each plan in the dataset. Now, why do we do customer ID is equal to n unique? Because n unique means number of unique values. So this counts the number of different customers in each plan. So the output shows basic is 5 customers, premium is 7, and standard is 9. So we use n unique instead of basic count because a customer ID should uniquely represent one customer. If duplicate customer records existed, n unique would count that customer only once. So churn flag is mean, just like before. This calculates the average churn flag for each plan. Because the values are 0 and 1, the average becomes the churn rate. So the output shows basic is 60%, premium approximately 14.3%, and standard is approximately 22.2%. Now, let's go for the business interpretation here. Now, the pivot table provides three useful business metrics in one summary. So the premium plan, as you can see, generates the highest combined monthly charges, also has the lowest churn rate, right? So the premium plan had the lowest churn rate, but it generates the highest combined monthly charges. Standard plan has the highest number of customers, right? It has highest number of customers, while the basic plan has the highest churn rate. This suggests that the premium plan is the strongest performing plan in the simulation dataset because it combines higher revenue contribution with better customer retention. However, these values represent the current small simulation dataset, so they should not be generalized without analyzing a large customer population. Okay, so I think it's very clear how to create a multi-metric pivot table and how to analyze churn rate by plan type using a pivot table. So that's it, guys. We will move to the next video. And yeah, next video is basically SQL integration with Python. This is going to be interesting. And yeah, I'll take it for the next video.